All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Assemblywomen. Aristophanes in 391 BC mapped out what happens when women vote, written by Conrad Riker, available now, links in description. The wrong coffee order that killed the West. Aristophanes, the Marxist death cult of female voting, and the red pill logic to save the male soul. In 391 BC, Aristophanes gazed into the looming turmoil and crafted a tragedy cloaked as comedy, Ecclesiazusae or the Assemblywomen. He depicted with alarming clarity exactly what occurs when women commandeer the state's political mechanisms, motivated not by justice, but by a biological urge towards seizure and domination. Praxagora, the proto-Bolshevik of the Acropolis, sought more than the vote. She demanded the common pot, the total obliteration of private property, and the compulsory sharing of husbands. This fever dream is an exact duplicate of the equity-obsessed nightmare we currently endure. This is not a novel occurrence. It is a recurring pathology, a gynocentric malignancy that insists on pulling the exceptional down into the collective's mediocrity because it cannot abide the excellence it lacks. You see the play acting out in the ruins of our cities and the wreckage of our jurisprudence every single day. The leftist narrative demands you rewrite history to fit a narrative of victimhood, redefining words and dismantling logic, the very grammar of reality, to make you feel guilty for existing. They test you constantly, subconsciously, just like the barista who gets your coffee wrong to see if you will apologize for her incompetence. That tiny moment is a calibrated biological weapon, a shit test, designed to measure your threshold for indignation. If you accept the frame, if you shrink your physical presence to avoid man-spreading, or if you crack under the pressure of a simple time pressure puzzle, you are signaling your willingness to be a cuckold in your own civilization. We are going to dissect these evolutionary mechanics with the scalpel of the trivium. I will show you why the narrative of male vulnerability is a trap designed to parasitically feed off your strength, and why comfort is the poison that creates civilization fatigue. We will look at the confident walk, the physical manifestation of the logos, and see why it is the ultimate rejection of the feminist attempt to physically castrate the male form. It is time to weaponize the truth, to smash the degenerate demons of cultural Marxism, and to re-enshrine the transcendental spirit of the West. The path forward is not through compromise, but through the relentless, unapologetic application of reason, strength, and the undeniable facts of our nature. The proto-Bolshevik of the Acropolis, Aristophanes, on the equity delusion. Aristophanes wrote Ecclesiazusae in 391 BC, but he might as well have been describing the floor of Congress yesterday, or the boardroom of a woke tech giant this morning. The play follows Praxagora, a woman who dresses as a man to infiltrate the Athenian assembly and seizes the machinery of the state to implement a radical redistribution of wealth and the communalization of women and property. She is the proto-Bolshevik of the Acropolis, a figure who anticipates the horrors of the 20th century by over 2 millennia. She proposes that the state manage all assets, creating a common pot into which every citizen must throw their worldly goods, from their savings to their furniture, under the guise that this will end poverty. This is the economic illiteracy of the female-centric mind on full display. the fundamental inability to grasp that wealth is generated by the masculine creative spark risk innovation and production, not a static pile of gold to be divided by a screeching committee. Aristophanes exposes the equity delusion for what it is, a parasitic mechanism where the mediocre devour the competent, mistaking the existence of the pie for the production of the pie. The direct consequence of this female-led coup within the drama is a widespread deficit, a frightening comparison to our contemporary welfare system and the manufactured lack of supply found in Marxist economic strategies such as the Green New Deal. Upon establishing their utopia, the women of Athens do not generate plenty. Instead, they spawn queues, rationing, and an abrupt, alarming void of all things desirable. This manifests the gynocentric utopia of shortage, clearly disproving the falsehood that redistributing wealth generates affluence. Instead, it generates shared suffering. The eradication of excellence occurs instantly. Why strive to construct a quality chair or bake a savory loaf when the government confiscates it to feed a man who declines to labor? This signifies the end of the inherent worth of labor, supplanted by the raw, instinctual hunger of the collective to devour until nothing remains but the framework of the civilization that erected it. With the confiscation of property comes the erasure of the male logos, the rational ordering principle that keeps chaos at bay. In the play, once the women dismantle the male oversight of the state, the immediate collapse of law and order follows. You need only look at the current feminist dismantling of due process and the presumption of innocence in Western jurisprudence to see the replay of this ancient tragedy. When the masculine spirit of law, the firm, objective line that separates right from wrong, is replaced by the fluid, emotional subjectivity of the feminine, the result is not justice, but a kangaroo court where feelings hold the gavel. We see this in the family courts where fathers are stripped of their children based on accusations rather than evidence, a systemic cuckoldry of the male citizen that mirrors the chaos Aristophanes mocked. Fueling this turmoil stands the archetype of the smiler, the feminist protagonist within the play who pledges everything to everyone. Praxagora beams as she robs men of their entitlements and possessions, personifying the biological force of maternalism gone awry. She pledges safety at the expense of liberty and self-respect, a tempting deception that draws in the spineless and the fearful. This reveals the malady of the caring regime that attempts to manage adult men like kids, stifling them with a suffocating shroud of support that is identical to confinement. It remains the ultimate disloyalty, a smile concealing the assassin's blade of the totalitarian, banking on the exploitation of the naive to command dominance they could never secure through capability. This manipulation relies on radical historiography, the modern academic obsession with retroactively applying victimhood narratives to the past to justify present-day theft. Aristophanes dismantles this by showing the absurdity of the equity project itself. Equity is a lie used to level the superior to the mediocre, a spiteful attempt to rewrite history because reality itself is deemed oppressive. Using the trivium, we can see the leftist theory is grammatically unsound because it relies on redefining words like equity to mean theft, and it is rhetorically void because it relies on emotional manipulation rather than cold, hard facts. Any ideology seeking to rewrite history to suit feelings is inherently a fraud, a shadow play designed to hide the ugly reality of envy. That envy brings us to the syllogism of envy, the only logical proof you need to understand the motive behind these lies. The demand for equity is not based on justice, which rewards merit. It is based on spite, which seeks to destroy the beautiful and the capable simply because they exist. Major premise: justice is the rewarding of merit and productivity. Minor premise: equity is the forced equality of outcome regardless of merit. Conclusion: equity is the negation of justice and the institutionalization of envy. Aristophanes knew this 2,400 years ago, mapping out the entire rotten structure of leftist ideology before it even had a name. The play is not a comedy. It is a documentary on the future, a warning from the dead to the living to stop the smilers from seizing the pot before the lights of the West go out for good. The ancient comedy writer's play was actually a prediction, not a mockery, for what Praxagora enacted through law in Athens. The contemporary woman executes through manipulation in your nearby coffee shop. We have transitioned from the grand stage of the ecclesiazusai to the absurd theater of your everyday existence, where the identical biological drives that forced the seizure of private possessions now compel the taking of your self-respect via subtle offenses masked as mishaps. When she asserts you bought the incorrect beverage, she isn't just wrong. She's employing incompetence as a weapon to challenge your character, just as her predecessors pushed the boundaries of Athenian regulations. The evolutionary arms race, decoding the wrong coffee shit test. Consider the terrifying reality of the modern coffee shop, a microcosm of the gynocentric order where a man's worth is measured not by his labor or his intellect, but by his ability to navigate the chaotic emotional currents of a female interlocutor. You stand there, clutching a cardboard sleeve, having meticulously executed the order. Oat milk, 2 pumps of vanilla, no foam. She takes a sip, her eyes narrowing not in confusion, but in calculation, and she declares it wrong. This is not a mistake. It is a biologically calibrated trap, a shit test rooted in the evolutionary imperative of hyperselectivity. Research in evolutionary psychology reveals that women are hardwired to seek mates who can tame their inherent chaos. And this petty complaint is a subconscious vetting mechanism designed to filter out low-status men who tolerate disrespect. If you apologize, you signal that you are subservient, weak, and incapable of asserting dominance over reality itself. You are failing the test before you have even begun to fight for your existence within the relationship. This dynamic is not confined to the private sphere. It is reinforced by the relentless cultural programming of the media industrial complex, a machine dedicated to the erasure of male competence. Turn on the TV and you will see the same insidious trope repeated ad nauseum. The bumbling, incompetent husband who apologizes profusely to the shrill, all-knowing wife for his mere existence. This is the normalization of male disposability, a narrative designed to condition you to accept abuse as your natural station. You are meant to laugh at the Homer Simpsons of the world while ignoring the tragic reality they represent, the stripping of male dignity and the transference of authority to the emotional whims of the feminine. These shows are the cultural equivalent of a sugar-coated poison pill, teaching young men that to be loved, they must be wrong, and to be a man, they must be a fool. We must employ the rigor of the trivium to dismantle the illusion of compliance with a simple, irrefutable syllogism. If you apologize for a coffee you did not ruin, you are logically signaling that you will accept responsibility for failures that are not yours. If you accept responsibility for failures that are not yours, you are signaling a willingness to accept guilt for crimes you did not commit. Therefore, if you apologize for the wrong coffee, you are logically demonstrating a behavioral marker for future cuckoldry and total social obsolescence. This is the slippery slope to ruination, where the apology for a misplaced beverage becomes the apology for a divorce you didn't want, for assets you didn't lose, and for a child's love you were legislated out of. Logic dictates that submission in the face of a lie is the hallmark of a man destined to be exploited. We must look to the profound wisdom of Schopenhauer, who recognized that woman's primary device is deceit, a fundamental instinct to manipulate reality to serve her emotional needs. The wrong coffee incident is merely the training wheels for a lifetime of betrayal, a low-stakes rehearsal for the high-stakes cruelty of divorce, rape, and false accusations that await the compliant man. By testing your boundaries with a trivial lie, she is assessing the elasticity of your conscience. If she can make you bend to a lie about a latte, she knows she can make you break when the stakes involve the family court, the house, and the kids. This is the evolutionary biology of deceit in action. It is a cruel testing mechanism to determine if you possess the dark triad traits of assertiveness required to withstand her chaotic nature, or if you are simply a resource to be farmed and discarded. The remedy to this psychological warfare is not to shout, not to plead, but to employ the weapon of stoic silence and reclaim the frame of reality. When she claims the coffee is wrong, you do not apologize. You look her in the eye with the cold, hard stare of a man who knows the truth, and you correct the record without emotion. You say, "I ordered exactly what you asked for," and you hold the line. This shatters the psychological frame she attempts to pull you into, a frame of subservience where her incompetence becomes your fault. By refusing to apologize, you re-establish the patriarchal hierarchy of competence, where objective reality, what was actually ordered and actually received, supersedes her subjective emotional experience. You are not a servant to her whims, you are the guardian of truth, and in that truth you find the only path to a civilization that values the good, the true, and the beautiful above the chaotic noise of feelings. This smoking ruin of a server room is not merely a corporate tragedy. It is the inevitable result of a civilization that has swapped the spear for the therapy session, trading the survival of the fittest for the comfortable suicide of the fittest. The Marxist feminist complex has successfully pathologized the masculine stress response, convincing the masses that the sharp edge of adrenaline, the very biological state that allowed Western man to conquer the wilderness and master the elements, is a defect to be managed rather than a divine spark to be wielded. They fear the pressure because they know that under its glare, their ideological house of cards collapses, exposing the biological reality they desperately try to legislate out of existence. We must stop viewing the physiological rush of crisis as a threat to our safety and recognize it instead as the only environment where the living spirit of true competence can survive. Comfort is the slow poison of civilization, and it is time we rediscovered the intoxicating, life-affirming power of the stress they want us to fear. The stress gauge, why the puzzle under pressure, is the only metric that matters. Walk into any modern corporate tower, and you can practically smell the estrogen and fear in the air, a thick, cloying perfume of safety that suffocates the very possibility of excellence. I recall a specific disaster at a tech firm in Seattle, a place so infested with diversity, equity, and inclusion mandates that the code base became a shrine to incompetence rather than a functional engine. When the servers inevitably melted down under the weight of their own bloat, triggered by a hiring process that prioritized genitalia and melanin over logic, the engineering team, a soft-handed collective of yes men who had been trained to prioritize emotional validation over raw results, froze. They spent the critical first hour of the outage drafting a statement about impact and safe spaces while the business burned. This is the silent generation in action, a soyified cohort where the amygdala is atrophied by comfort, rendering them incapable of executing the violent, immediate actions required to save civilization from the flames. They are the product of an environment that confuses kindness with weakness and consensus with competence, leading to catastrophic failure when the indifferent reality of physics and logic inevitably intrudes on their feelings. We must stop viewing this biological alarm bell as a defect and start recognizing it as the gateway to the divine. The adrenaline rush is not a panic attack, but the transcendental state where the living spirit of Western man resides. The postmodernists, those high priests of despair, want you to believe that peace is found in the lotus position, in a Buddhist-style pacifism that is really just a sophisticated form of surrender. They tell you to chill and be present, which is code for be docile and easy to manage. But look at the history of our bloodline. We didn't conquer the globe and map the stars by taking deep breaths and suppressing our aggression. We accessed a state of flow that looks suspiciously like violence to the uninitiated. When the clock starts ticking and the stakes rise, that spike in heart rate is the signal that you are leaving the mundane world of the domesticated herd and entering the realm where giants are forged. To reject the rush is to reject the very biological imperiousness that built the Parthenon and the Pantheon. Consider the logic of survival stripped of all sentimental decoration. Major premise: civilization requires protection to exist. Minor premise: only men who can solve puzzles under pressure possess the competence to protect civilization. Conclusion: men who cannot solve puzzles under pressure are the end of civilization. This is not a negotiable theory. It is a syllogism of existence that shatters the fragile glass house of leftist egalitarianism. There is no nuance here, no intersectionality that saves you when the bridge collapses or the enemy breaches the gate. If you cannot hold the line when the pressure mounts, you are not a victim of the system. You are the flaw in the machine that guarantees its destruction. The refusal to accept this basic biological reality is the hallmark of the left, whose entire ideology collapses under the weight of its own refutation the moment reality demands a solution rather than a grievance. You can see the biological betrayal written on the faces of these men when the pressure hits. I have watched it in the eyes of a manager who was handed a crisis simulation, a simple logic puzzle with a ticking timer, and saw him physically disintegrate. It is the cracking phenomenon, a physiological collapse where cortisol spikes and floods the system with panic, paralyzing the prefrontal cortex while testosterone, the hormone of action and dominance, evaporates. This reaction is not a momentary lapse. It is a permanent mark of inferiority, a biological failure mode that screams unfit to anyone with eyes to see. A man who cracks during a crisis is exhibiting a genetic dead end, a throwback to the prey animal that freezes in the headlights, rather than the predator that lunges for the throat. To trust such a man with the defense of a family, a company, or a nation is not just foolish, it is suicidal. The left, in its infinite malice, has constructed a narrative of fragility that exploits this failure, redefining masculinity not as a capacity for protection, but as a pathology to be cured. They don't want to heal male vulnerability. They want to parasitically feed off it, monetizing your anxiety through the victim industry of therapy and pharmaceutical submission. They tell you that your aggression is toxic and that your urge to conquer is a disorder, gaslighting you into believing that your natural instincts are the result of patriarchal social conditioning. This is a wicked deception designed to castrate you spiritually, turning the lions of the West into the lambs of the globalist slaughterhouse. They weaponize your shame, turning your biological drive to protect into a guilt complex that keeps you shackled to their ideological plantation. This lack of necessary stress creates a physiological rot I call civilization fatigue. We are living in an era of unprecedented ease, and it is literally killing us. The lack of kinetic consequence in modern, feminized societies means that men are never tested, never hardened, and therefore never truly made. Unlike our ancestors who carved the West out of ice and wilderness, with nothing but iron will and sharp steel, modern men wither under the slightest pressure. They are soft, pale, and mentally brittle because they have never been allowed to face the consequences of their own incompetence. The body and mind are like muscles. Without the resistance of a heavy weight, they atrophy. We are surrounded by men who look like adults but possess the emotional resilience of a toddler, and it is because the left has systematically removed every crucible from their path. Comfort is the poison, and the antidote is the time pressure puzzle. The theory of giving him a puzzle to solve under time pressure is not a game, it is an exorcism. When you strip away the safety nets and force a man to solve a complex problem with the clock ticking, you strip away the illusions of the modern world. You find out instantly if he is a man of value or a liability in a pretty suit. There is no hiding behind HR policies or diversity quotas. When the timer is counting down, there's only the cold, hard truth of his competence. If he collapses, he was never truly alive to begin with. We must embrace the crucible of high-stakes problem solving, not merely to succeed, but to reveal the masculine essence that the cultural Marxists have tried so desperately to bury. Only in the heat of that pressure can we determine who is fit to inherit the future. I have exposed the physiological rot of the modern male, demonstrating precisely how the feminist Marxist complex turns the male nervous system into a fragile, brittle instrument that shatters the moment reality, demands a solution. We have established logically that the man who cannot hold his own in a crisis is a civilizational dead end, a biological cul-de-sac spawned by a culture that actively despises competence and worships weakness. But this fragility, this pathetic eagerness to submit to the comfort of the cage, does not remain hidden in the mind. It betrays itself instantly through the vessel of the flesh. The body is the undeniable manifestation of the spirit, and a spirit conquered by cultural Marxism cannot help but contort itself into a posture of apology and submission. The left attempts to gaslight you into believing hierarchy is a mere social construct. Yet they know, deep in their primitive biology, that hierarchy is written in our very stance. Before a man even faces a puzzle, before the adrenaline spikes, his geometry broadcasts his worthiness to dominate reality. We must fix our gaze upon the undeniable physical evidence of this decay. The gate of the gods, physical presence as the final rejection of the feminine. Look at the biological reality right in front of your face. Women are hardwired by millions of years of evolutionary selection to assess genetic fitness through posture instantly. When a man walks into a room, the female primitive brain, unburdened by the politically correct delusions of the modern era, scans his carriage for signs of vitality, testosterone, and dominance before he even opens his mouth. This is not a social construct. It is a survival mechanism written into the very code of life. The modern epidemic of the slouch, the defeated concave curvature of the spine, is not merely a bad habit resulting from too much time hunched over glowing screens. It is a catastrophic biological signal of low genetic quality. When you adopt the posture of a defeated captive, you are broadcasting to the world that you are weak, sick, and unworthy of reproduction. You are actively repulsing the very feminine attention you claim to desire simply because you have allowed a toxic environment to poison your physical expression. Here is an ironclad syllogism that destroys the modern male's malaise, major premise. To command reality, one must physically occupy reality. Minor premise: the modern male is indoctrinated from birth to shrink from reality, to make himself small, and to apologize for his own volume. Conclusion: the modern male is rendered impotent and incapable of commanding his own life. Logic dictates that a being which contracts its physical boundaries surrenders its claim to territory. You cannot be the master of your domain if you physically resemble a victim begging for mercy. The refusal to occupy space is a logical error in the hierarchy of dominance. It is a unilateral surrender to the chaotic void that seeks to consume you. This biological imperative brings us to the absurdity of the man-spreading hysteria, a perfect case study in the feminist attempt to legislate against male biology. This manufactured outrage is not about etiquette on public transportation. It is a direct, calculated attack on the male imperative to dominate his environment. By pathologizing the natural male posture where the knees are apart, a stance necessary for comfortable anatomical alignment in the male pelvis, the left is attempting to physically castrate the male form. They want to shame you out of your own biology, to force you to compress your body into a feminine configuration of closure and defense. It is a war on anatomy disguised as social etiquette, and it is designed to make you physically submit to the collective delusion that your biological reality is a crime. Consider the confident walk in contrast to the pathetic shuffle of the modern cuckold. Walk through a city center and observe the hunched, fearful posture of the average male indoctrinated by feminism to shrink his physical presence to make space for women. He walks with his head down, shoulders rolled forward, clutching his phone like a secular rosary, terrified of offending. This is the anatomy of the cuckold, the physical manifestation of a man who has accepted his own subjugation. He is physically apologizing for his existence, inviting the predation of stronger, more confident entities. In contrast, a man who walks with his head high, chest out, and shoulders back is making a statement of sovereignty. He is not asking for permission to exist. He is declaring it as a fait accompli. We must examine this through the lens of the Greeks, specifically the concept of kalokagathia, the unity of the beautiful and the good. To the ancient mind, physical posture was the outward manifestation of the soul's alignment with the logos, the rational order of the universe. A man who carries himself with confidence is not merely displaying good health. He is enacting a philosophical argument that his spirit is ordered, brave, and in tune with the transcendentals. If the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, a slouching, timid vessel is a desecration. To allow your physical form to collapse into weakness is to commit a heresy against the potential of your own soul. The confident walk is philosophy in motion. It is the living proof of a mind that has conquered fear and embraced the good. Your physical carriage is a form of nonverbal rhetoric, the most primal and persuasive kind. When a man carries himself well, He is making a philosophical argument for his own value without speaking a single word. He is utilizing the visual language of hierarchy, signaling to those around him that he is competent, capable, and dangerous. The left understands this implicitly, which is why they attack masculinity at the physical level, encouraging men to be soft, weak, and physically indistinct. They know that a man who stands tall is a walking billboard for the values of Western civilization: strength, honor, and unyielding resolve. Therefore, you must redeem the flesh and re-entrain the truth physically. Lift heavy iron until your posture is forced to correct itself under the weight of iron and gravity. Walk like the statues of antiquity, those marble giants who stood watch over the birth of the greatest civilization the world has ever known. Turn your body into a weapon against the Marxist lie of equality. When you stand tall, you are rejecting the egalitarian drivel that seeks to drag you into the mud. You are asserting that hierarchy is natural, that excellence is real, and that you are a living demonstration of the order of the cosmos. Do not apologize for your size or your strength. Weaponize it. By reclaiming your physical presence, you reclaim your mind and your soul, and you cast the wicked lies of the cultural Marxists back into the abyss where they belong. Do you see it now? The Greek stage of 391 BC was not merely a play, but a prophecy. And the modern coffee shop is not just a cafe, but a combat arena for your soul. When she serves you the wrong latte, expecting you to apologize, she is reenacting the very same seizure enacted by the play's protagonist on the Acropolis. She is checking if you will surrender your assets, your dignity, to the common pot of her feelings. If you bow, if you shrink, if you apologize for an offense you did not commit, you are voluntarily entering the equity illusion where your excellence is punished to make room for her mediocrity. This is the evolutionary trap, to filter out the strong and reward the obedient. Look around at the wreckage of the men who failed this test, the men who chose comfort over the crucible. You see them in the divorce courts, stripped of assets and progeny by a system that views them only as liabilities. You see the skyrocketing male suicide rates, a silent holocaust of disposable males who were told that vulnerability was a virtue and that strength was toxic. These are the men who cracked under the time pressure puzzle, who could not hold the line when the cultural Marxist wolves came for the children. They lost their frame and they lost their lives. We are the last line of defense against the woke demolition of the logos. We are the only wall standing between order and the gynocentric void. But you possess the antidote now. You have the map. You know that the wrong coffee is a lie, that the stress is your fuel, and that your confident stride is the physical manifestation of immutable truth. Walk tall, occupy your space with the unshakable arrogance of a Roman senator, and solve the puzzles of life with the cold efficiency of a philosopher king. Do not apologize for existing. Do not apologize for being right. Take this red pill knowledge. Harden your heart against the deceit and go forth into the world to rebuild the shattered pillars of Western civilization, one unyielding stance at a time. The lie is broken, the truth is yours. And now the sponsored book introduction, Assemblywomen. Aristophanes in 391 BC mapped out what happens when women vote. The ground beneath your feet is not shifting because of tectonic natural forces, but because the bedrock of civilization has been deliberately detonated by an agenda that despises you. You feel it in the hollow ache of a confiscated paycheck, in the institutionalized disdain for your competence, and in the relentless cultural propaganda that equates your masculinity with toxicity. They have torched the Constitution and replaced it with a chaotic, emotionalistic tyranny, and you are the one paying for the ashes. When Aristophanes staged Assemblywomen in 391 BC, the Athenian audience roared with laughter, but he was not writing a farce. He was etching a prophecy into stone. He mapped out the precise terminus of female suffrage, a world where the serpent's ballot dissolves private property and destroys the incentive to build, protect, or produce. We are no longer watching a play. We are living the final act of a tragedy where the ledger of ruin is balanced on the backs of men who are demonized for keeping the lights on. Consider the economic syllogism that governs your reality. Men generate the vast majority of tax revenue, build every meaningful infrastructure, and die in the trenches to maintain order, Yet, the state apparatus has been weaponized to confiscate that labor to fund a system that brands them oppressors. This is the contract of bondage, a parasitic arrangement where a voting bloc that contributes a lifetime net negative to the treasury wields the altar of convenience to legislate wealth transfer from the producers to the consumers. Feminism is not about equality. It is a specific strain of cultural Marxism, an occultic reshaping of reality that mimics Mein Kampf by manufacturing a scapegoat class, men to justify total control. They have replaced logic with a geometry of hysteria, using unfalsifiable claims of patriarchy to silence the empirical data, showing that the liberation of one sex has resulted in the enslavement of the other. I have walked through the citadel of lies that our universities have become, witnessing firsthand how the critical theory plague has rotted the intellect of an entire generation. The modern discourse is devoid of the trivium. It lacks grammar, logic, and rhetoric, replaced instead by solipsistic shit-testing and emotional blackmail. They refuse to define terms, conflating harm with offense to bypass rational debate. But you possess the capacity to see through the riddle of Sphinx. You understand that we are in the midst of a moral collapse, a Babylon of Babel where language is broken to prevent the articulation of truth. This book is a weapon, forged in the fires of classical philosophy and hardened by the undeniable data of the present moment. It is a manual for the architectonic necessity of rebuilding a society that respects the stoic virtues of our ancestors. Put this book down right now if you're looking for comfort, validation, or a participation trophy. If you believe that feelings are facts, that the wage gap is a result of sexism rather than choices, or that men are inherently evil simply for existing, this text will be agonizing for you. Go back to your corporate sludge, your mindless entertainment, or your hobbies that distract you from the decline. This knowledge is not for the sheep who bleat for the shepherd. It is for the lions who intend to rule the jungle. There is no middle ground here. You are either part of the sovereign exit strategy, or you are fuel for the fire. For the man who remains, know that you are not alone. You are the remnant of Western civilization, starved of logic and positive archetypes, ready to reclaim your agency. We will dismantle their arguments with surgical precision, using the arsenal of rhetoric, and reclaim the intellectual heritage stolen by the woke mind virus. We will explore the creation of new institutions, free from the corruption of the current regime, using technology and decentralized networks to herald a new age. You will master the classical argumentation they fear and rediscover the path to unapologetic sovereign masculinity. This is the stoic bastion against the chaos. Welcome to the masculine restoration. Assemblywomen, Aristophanes in 391 BC, mapped out what happens when women vote, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.